So how do we go about building an advisory board that doesn't suck, right? Well, for starters, let's get some common definitions around what we mean by an advisory board. And I'm going to actually use the advisory board that I built up to help define the types of boards. In general, there are three kinds of boards. The first one, all the way on the left-hand side, is what I would characterize as a general advisory board, right? These are folks who basically provide you with strategic, tactical advice on your company, from topics ranging from recruiting, early stage angel fundraising, as well as just general business problems that you may encounter. And for our advisory board, I started off with two angel investors, Dr. Carrie Queen, who is one of the founders of Protein Design Labs, as well as Joe DeLuca, who's a 30-year veteran of the healthcare tech valley scene here in Silicon Valley. These folks have provided myself with the initial guidance as we built out the company a few years ago. The second type of advisory board is what I would characterize as a scientific advisory board. Some of you folks may know this as a technical advisory board. These are folks who actually have deep subject matter expertise in your space, right? So they're the gurus who really understand your market, your demographics, your customer base. From our standpoint, the space we operate in is clinical research and trials. So we went out trying to find really deep subject matter experts who really understood the industry. And between the three folks that you see up on the screen, they have roughly over 50 years experience running and managing clinical trials. So whenever I have a question around the clinical research industry, these are the folks I actually go after. And finally, all the way on the right-hand side is what most people usually, when they think of boards, is the board of directors, right? These are folks who represent the venture capital firms that invest in your company, in your startup. And for ourselves, both Darren Haidt and Mo Kaushal, who represent Aberdare Ventures, which is one of the sponsor VC firms here at Rock Health, as well as Mo Kaushal, who is a partner over at West South Investment Fund, are two of the directors on my board. And these folks typically, I meet about, well actually one of them, Darren, here is in San Francisco, I meet him quite often, but I spoke to them regularly, probably on a weekly basis, followed up by a quarterly formally board meeting. And usually at the board meeting, you also have committees that relate to audit, compensation, and corporate governance. So these are just the basic definitions associated with the types of boards that you're going to encounter on your journey as you build up your company. So let's think about building the boards now. And the way I've built this presentation, I center around 7 general tips or suggestions, right? And I think one of the first things you need to think about when you build your board, whether it's an advisory board, technical advisory board, is you got to understand your goals. You really have to understand why you want these advisors, right? And the way I like to think about things around goals is around whether or not you're at pre versus post product to market fit, right? Now, how many folks here understand the concept of PMF and product to market fit? We're all here in Silicon Valley and lean, right? So usually when you're at pre product to market fit, it's really trying to surround yourself with as many subject matter experts as possible who can actually give you access to interviewees so that you can get validation around either your business model, your product, or anything pertaining to your initial startup. As a company gets closer to PMF, you start thinking a lot more around, visibility, boosting your reputation, your street cred, right? That it becomes of paramount importance because social proofing then becomes critical as you go out eventually to raise significant financing rounds. Now, many would argue access to capital, irrespective of whether or not your pre-post product market fit, is critical, and I do tend to agree with that. All I'm saying, though, is as you're building out your initial advisors, particularly when you're at the idea stage, the assumption is that you probably have some seed funding. You really want to surround yourself with folks who actually really do have that subject matter content and expertise. Now, the second suggestion is start by dating. Right? I mean, this is a metaphor that you continually come up with in Silicon Valley, whether you're going after venture capital financing or whatnot, or even after partners. But it all starts with trying to get to know who your advisors are. And the questions that, usually that I went through as I was trying to build out my advisory board were a handful that I continued kept in the back of my mind. Right? The first one is, do they possess, obviously, the relevant skill set? Right? Whether it's domain expertise, it's technical, functional, Startup expertise is one that I think is really crucial, particularly when you're at the idea stage, because they can actually help frame the problem set and the general initial direction of your company and the strategy. Do they passionately believe in your cause? I mean, I cannot understate this enough, right? Overstate this enough. One of my initial advisors, Sherry Reuter, who is a deep clinical operator, I mean, she really loved our idea around bringing innovation to this real kludgy problem around running clinical trials. And even beyond the scope of our agreement, she goes out there hitting the pavement, spreading the word and gospel of GOBALTO. That quintessential early evangelist that's just really doing it because she really truly believes in what we're about. So to the extent that you can surround yourselves around folks who really believe in what you're doing, they're going to go beyond the extra mile to achieve the goals of your company. Bandwidth is a key issue, right? I mean, do they really have the time? Like typically, how much time for the folks here who do have advisors, how much time do they really commit to your startup, right? They're off doing their own thing, and if they're worth their salt, they're really busy. So to the extent they can actually give you the time, whether it's 1 or 2 hours quality time out of the month, is something to really value. And obviously connections are critical, because it's not only the advisor, but also the circle of friends they have beyond themselves that they're going to be able to connect you with. And finally, what you can't really see on the screen is chemistry, right? A big part of the reason why I went with Aberdare Ventures and Darren, as well as West South Investment Fund, which is Mo, is these are guys I really enjoy being around. Like, I don't mind just picking up the phone and grabbing a scotch with these guys. I mean, I really actually genuinely like these guys, and I think it was really important that I had that chemistry with them, because times aren't always going to be easy, obviously, as everyone knows, when you're in startup mode. And be very selective, right? You guys are all special, right? You guys have amazing ideas, and you should be extremely selective in the advisors that you're bringing into your circle, because it's a privilege for them to be part of the journey that you guys are embarking on. So, I would really emphasize, as advisors come into your sphere, really challenge them and really push them in making them give the case as to why they should be part of your general board. Now, vanity board members. This is a very big issue that I always come across here in the Valley, right? I don't know if you guys recognize the faces up here, but these are staples of the Silicon Valley intelligentsia, right? Big names here in the Valley, but the question I have is, if you were to bring these folks on board, like really, what is their bandwidth? It goes back to the question around their time commitment to your startup. On the one hand, they're going to give you great, social proofing, right? Wow, you got Eric Ries on your board. How awesome is that? But at the end of the day, when you're in the early stages, really question to yourself by having a high marquee name in terms of the true value they're going to bring to your startup beyond just the visibility of the name. All right, third, think about what the advisors are actually going to get out of this relationship. How many of you guys recognize these faces up here? Don't you love the Shark Tank? I love the Shark Tank. I always ask my wife, hey, if I took my GOBALTO to these guys, I want $5 million, I'm going to give you 5%, but we really don't have any revenues. What sort of deal do you think I would get out of that transaction? Probably not a very good one, but if you think about a lot of the questions that are raised in the show, it's all around, these guys are extremely self-motivated in terms of what they're going to get out of the deal, and advisors are no different, right? Advisors, you try to think about, put yourself in their shoes and put their hat on, and if somebody asked you to be an advisor, why would you commit to be an advisor, right? Questions around, does the product or space really get yourself excited, right? Advisors, a lot of them, they want to be stimulated just as well as yourselves. Is your startup going to boost their reputation, right? They want to align themselves with the next big thing, right? So the extent that you can actually sell the vision of your company and why it would get them jazzed, I think is a pretty important lever. As well as, are you the real deal, and are you going to be around tomorrow, right? They don't want to be associated with fly-by-night startups. They want to be involved with companies that are going to be making a lasting, important difference. So, what I found really effective as I was going out to building out my advisory board was around these different elements to really think about, as an advisor, do I, as a company and as a startup, possess these elements that will attract the best advisors out there? Now, networking. This is such a, I'm sure a lot of you guys obviously know, yeah, networking obviously is clearly important. What I really want to articulate here is some of the practical applications that I've seen in terms of the different types of network venues to really build out the advisory board. LinkedIn, what I find extremely valuable is if you're looking for that very specific skill set, LinkedIn is a powerful application tool to find a specific advisor. I'll give you a great example. The space that we operate in is the clinical research space, right? And one of our biggest incumbent competitors are folks and providers who provide clinical trial management software platform, CTMS, dominated by Oracle Siebel. We were trying to find an industry veteran who had extensive experience in this space, but who also were innovators. And those two really don't go hand in hand, right? We want somebody who had the subject matter expertise, but also could be forward-thinking and out-of-the-box thinking enough that we could really tap into. That would be part of our mission. And actually screening through quite a bit of backgrounds in LinkedIn, surprisingly, we actually found that particular candidate who's been a boon, an enormous source of intelligence and the wealth of ideas in terms of defining our product vision. So if there's just one aspect around LinkedIn beyond just the general networking, is if you're looking for that specific skill set, I found it to be a pretty phenomenal tool. Conferences. So partnerships in clinical trials was an event I just came back from in Orlando just last night. The great thing about conferences, what I like beyond just the general hobnobbing and meeting people, is if you speakers that participate in speaking panels are actually a great source of potential advisors, right? The reason why is because these guys, first of all, they already love the visibility. And they're subject matter experts, which is why they probably were invited to be speakers in the first place. And they're very inclined and open to opportunities where they want to be part of the next big thing. So to the extent when you go to these conferences, check out who's speaking there and see if any of these fit kind of your profile and the type of advisor you want. And typically the best time is to grab them right after they present because they're on a high and a buzz. And to the extent that you can really convey your value proposition, I found is pretty effective in terms of engaging them. And obviously, as you guys know, and particularly for all you folks out there on the internet, going to seed accelerators are pretty phenomenal. Just getting connected with advisors that have just more of the functional expertise around legal aspects and some of the business and accounting issues that you will encounter day to day. So we're on to the fifth suggestion, start small, right? Can't really see the numbers which are cut below the screen, but rather than going off and trying to build, I've seen some of these startup companies that have 15, 20 advisors. I mean, how many hours in the month are you going to be really have hours in the day to be speaking to all these advisors? Typically the rule of thumb and what I've seen from some of the other successful startups is for the advisory board, who are general advisors, anywhere between 2 to 3. For a technical advisory board, between 2 to 4, and board directors, I usually start off with 3 to start off with when you're just beginning your financing rounds. And the way I think about it in terms of numbers is, and again, I'm targeting really high quality advisors, folks you are going to engage on a consistent basis, is think about the number of hours that you really do have out of the month and what you're going to be engaging them for on a monthly ongoing basis. And just between, let's see, 7 advisors here, that's 7 hours out of the month. Add on another 7 hours between scheduling, logistics, and whatnot. That's already close to 2 days out of your month that you're burning, engaging advisors, assuming that you are doing them on a monthly basis. So think about, bandwidth considerations and in terms of what you're really going to get out of these group of folks, and give them homework, right? I mean, they're not here because of their pretty faces and their great charisma. I mean, be very particular in making sure that you give them something to think about after meetings. Like for myself, no matter what meeting I'm in with an advisor, I'm always thinking about what introduction I can get from them. Whether it's somebody they can connect me with as an interview, their employees as we're hiring, other people they can connect us with, as well as other potential investors. As well as for after each meeting, define the frequency of the next meeting and when the next call is. Make sure you have a clear action item in terms of when you're going to have the next meeting. Something we actually didn't do at ChickRx just an hour ago, so we're going to have to make sure I get the next appointment with you guys. And feedback. If nothing else, constantly ask them for feedback. They've got to be your most critical advisor in your circle. Everybody's, if more than anything else, they're going to be very supportive, right? Your friends, your family, even to some extent your investors. So your advisors, if they are trusted, they should be the ones who should be consistently pushing you to the limit to make sure they're challenging all of your assumptions. Because if they're not going to do it, I mean, who else is really going to do it? Now here's a more practical suggestion, which is kind of a corollary to the sixth one, is we actually use a wiki to actually sync up with our advisors, our board of directors, and I found this to be a really effective tool to just sync up with people, right? And what you have here is the GOBALTO wiki, and we call this Board Central. And really, we use this as a platform which we provide invite-only access to our advisory group as well as investors to really keep them abreast of what's really hot and interesting, as well as keep track of all the minutes, the financials, our milestones, as well as the guiding principles in terms of how we want to engage our advisory group. So this is somewhat of a departure from the somewhat archaic process of just having these quarterly board meetings. This is a living site where we can exchange ideas and continue to stay up to date in terms of what the challenges are, and really do a lot of knowledge sharing. So just something to keep in mind as you build out your advisors or anybody that you're engaging with in your circle. A really good, effective way to continue to stay synced up. Now, let's say you found your advisors, right? They like you, you like them. They've got the bandwidth. Everything's great. Got to formalize it and codify the relationship in an agreement. And typically, it comes around to how much time commitment from both sides you're going to give, the scope of work, as well as the compensation. And just on the compensation, I find that this is where most founders get really stuck, right? They're not really sure how much to pay their advisors. And I actually pulled this from the Founders Institute. I think this is a pretty useful guideline and framework to think about how to compensate your advisors. And the way it's structured is around different stages of evolution or maturity of your startup, starting from the idea stage, the startup, all the way through growth stage. And depending on how much time commitment the advisor is giving you, you come up with a certain percentage of your equity, typically over a 2 to 3 year vesting. Now again, this is just a framework. I wouldn't consider this as hard and fast, but I think it's a good guideline to think about as you start engaging your advisors, what the comp could be. And again, this is in the form of equity. I tend to stay away from cash, at least because obviously cash is king this early in the stage. But if you have folks who really passionately believe in what you're doing, they should be more than willing to take on equity. So to illustrate, most folks here I assume are somewhere between idea or at the startup stage. So if you're engaging an advisor at the startup stage, if they had monthly meetings, you give them about 15 basis points. Add on if they do some recruiting activities, it gets up to 40. And if they're actually making referrals to interviewees, making contacts on your behalf, as well as doing some special projects, that gets up to 80 basis points. Again, not hard and fast, but I think it's a pretty good guideline when you're thinking about compensation. And the Founder Institute also puts up what they call FAST. It's the Founder Advisor Agreement Template. It provides a very standard form, really straightforward, that can provide you with a standard agreement through which you can start initiating a dialogue with your advisor. And I found it's pretty easy to use. And if there are folks that are interested in this, just see me after the presentation. I can send you over a free version of the document. And just one more thing. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Fred Wilson from Union Square Ventures. He actually just started a new series on building board of directors. I'm a big fan of his blog, so if you get the chance, I would really encourage you to subscribe to this. He's going to be bringing up a lot of practical tips and ideas in terms of how to build out your more formal board of directors. This is more for when you get into investments from your venture capitalists or professional investors. And I think there's going to be a lot of good meat coming out of this series. So let's just recap 7 tips building your board, right? First off, start with understanding your goals. Before you even go anywhere, understand what you want to achieve out of your advisors. Be extremely selective, right? You guys are the bomb, so make sure you guys are coming with advisors that really are going to make you proud and is also going to represent. And in terms of approach advisors, also think about what they want, right? Get in their mindset and understand what it is about you that's going to attract them. 4, networking. Obviously, that's going to be a good source to find the specific advisors. Start small. Right? Don't try to come up with the 15, 20 listed advisors just to fill up your website, but really be selective again. Go back to the selective theme. Give them homework, action items, so that they can report back to you during your next meeting. And finally, formalize the arrangement through a contract. Now, let's say you've done everything well and it's all amazing. Hopefully, you can get somebody like this guy, Guy Kawasaki, right? And Although with Guy Kawasaki, although I really like the guy, I'm a big fan, he probably violates the second rule, right? He's got a lot of, I don't think he's going to have much bandwidth. He's too busy selling all the multiple books that he's been writing as of late. But you know, hopefully in the end, you're going to find an advisor that really resonates with what you're trying to accomplish in your startup.